Okay, precious ones, I'm back at my favorite place in the whole world, sitting here at my desk, getting to spend some time with you. I have been waiting and waiting for this opportunity. I wanted to share with you guys my favorite story, my favorite God story. And I really think of this as the capstone story of my life, or the most important part of my God story. It really set off, I guess, the whole notion in my mind of truthing. So let me do a brief, just like fly over the Grand Canyon view so you can see my heart about truthing and hear this God story. And the irony about this is that even though this is a story about me or that includes me, this is a God story. And what a God story is to me is a story that God Himself is writing on someone's heart. So grab your truthing journal, and I want to share with you a really cool story. So once a long, long time ago, in a land not very far away from where you are, there lived a little girl who had a charmed life and everything was perfect. Oh yeah, until the bubble popped. And until I realized that that was not really the case. I kind of walked through my spiritual journey for many years before that bubble popped. I had told myself a lie that everything was perfect and everything was normal, and everything, friends, was far from normal and it was far from perfect. I started my journey with God when I was 3, and it basically started simply with me telling God, hey, I want to be your best friend. It was my very first genuine conversation with God. Time unfolded until I was 12 when the bubble in my mind kind of popped. I thought I was normal. I thought everything was normal. I thought my story was normal, but it was not. I was really, really depressed, really, really sad, really, really frustrated, and God kind of started waking me up. He started tapping on my heart, letting me know that things were far from normal. So time kind of elapsed. My mother, through some amazing decisions that she made, fled with my brother and I to protect us from some bad situations. And we ended up in Dallas, Texas, sleeping on the floor of an exercise room that some friends from our church had that allowed us to stay. That was my first taste that my life might be not normal. I basically had done what a lot of people do. I knew about God, but I didn't know God directly. I had a lot of conversations, meaningful conversations between me and God, but nothing really substantive, where I poured my heart out to God, told God how I was really feeling, what I was really thinking, what I really needed. I wasn't really my best authentic version of myself. So I remember it like it was yesterday, this turning point in my life. I was sleeping in the exercise room, basically homeless, with my family. And I asked for a few moments by myself. And I remember sitting there in the quiet on that floor, just pouring my heart out to God. I cried and I cried and I cried, and I grabbed my notebook. And to this day, I don't know what made me do it. I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. Basically 8 pages front and back, single spaced, on college ruled paper, every single thing that bothered me. At this point, I was waking up to the fact that I had been molested. I realized that my family was abnormal. My circumstances were abnormal. I was depressed. I was shaken up, and that was only the beginning. I mean, I had no place to live. I thought my mom was going to die. She was very, very ill. I thought I was going to have custody of my brother. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was terrified and I was shaken up. And at that moment, I grabbed my paper, and I remember just ripping it out of the notebook, and I wadded it up and I threw it against the wall. And I remember sitting there and I was like, well, there you go, God. There you go. This is Brenda getting as raw and real and authentic and honest as I know how to get. What do we do with this? And I remember like it was yesterday that my Bible fell open in my lap. I had my Bible and a journal and a pen, and that was about it. And the Bible fell open, and I saw it clear as I'm sitting here today. 1 Peter 5:7 was what was open, and it says, casting all of your cares upon him because he cares for you. And I remember thinking, cast all my cares on you because you care for me. Okay. So I was like, well, I kind of just did that. I threw it against the wall. So I went over to the wall, picked up the wadded paper. And I remember there was an old shoebox on the floor of that room that was empty. And I picked up the shoebox and I put my cares all in the shoebox. And I said, well, God, honestly, this is all I know to do. That at this point, I was so sad that I can remember when I closed my eyes, all I could see was black. Like to the north, south, east, and west in my heart, like all I saw was black. And I was like, okay, what do I do with this? I mean, I don't know how to get out of this. And I remember God saying, would you be willing to just give it to me for a few days? And I was like, well, God, I'll be honest with you. I can't see myself surviving a few days. I can't see myself living for even a few more days with all of these things. And I remember God saying, well, how many days do you think that you could give me? And I was like, well, 3. I mean, I guess I could give you 3 days. And I can remember just sitting there in the quiet, like feeling God speak to my heart. And it was my first real connection where I felt like I could really hear him. And I feel like he said 3 days, Brenda. And so I was like, okay, well, 3 days it is. And so I put everything in the box and I put my hands on top of the box. And I remember pushing the lid down, and I said, God, for this 3 days, I'm going to give you all my cares, all my burdens, all my worries, everything. I'm going to just put it in this box and leave it here for you. And I was like, now what do we do? And I remember closing the lid on that box, and I looked down at my Bible, and in all of the moving around or whatever, my Bible was open to another Bible verse. And I saw that one crystal clear, Isaiah 26:3. And it simply says, I will keep you in perfect peace if you keep your mind stayed, fixed, or focused on me. And I remember thinking, I will keep you in perfect peace if I keep my mind stayed, fixed, or focused on God. I was like, okay, God, I don't know how to do that. I genuinely do not know how to do that. And then I remember thinking, that sounds a little impossible. Like, you want me to keep my mind stayed, fixed, or focused on you for 3 days? Like, what will happen then? And then I remember looking at it and I thought, okay, I'm going to give God 3 days. I'm going to take a vacation from my thoughts. I'm going to leave all of my cares, my burdens, my worries. I'm going to truly cast my worries on God and leave it with him and see what happens. Well, friends, let me just tell you, day 1 was fairly easy. I thought of everything I could think of about God, Jesus. I kind of exhausted it within 3 hours, to be very honest with you. I didn't have a whole lot of thoughts about what that would look like, but I imagined what it would look like seeing Jesus. I imagined what he would be wearing. I imagined him walking and talking to me. I flipped open my Bible and read everything I could read that was in red letters because I knew Jesus had said that. I tried making a list of everything that I knew about God. Basically, I went to school, I slept, I ate, and I walked around, but all I was really doing was thinking about God, thinking about Jesus. I kind of walked around in a daisy haze. Well, the first 2 days went okay. It was a little difficult because what was happening to me is the thoughts that I had put all in my cares box, as it came to be called, was kind of difficult to keep it there. But whenever it would come back to my mind, I would say, nope, I'm giving God this for just 3 days. I'm going to put my hands on the top of this box. God, I'm terrified of everything that's in there. I can't even think about it. I'm going to leave it in there and see what you can do, and back to focusing on you. And during those 3 days, it was massively difficult because I was learning the skill of not thinking about myself and not thinking about my problems. Well, friends, I basically am going to go into the details in all of Truthing about what those problems look like. but we're talking homelessness, molestation, abuse, neglect, problems, galore. I mean, there were so many problems, I couldn't even imagine what it would feel like to not have one of those, much less 8 pages single spaced front and back, because that's what was in my cares box. At the end of the 3 days, I was walking down the hallway of my high school, and I remember distinctly opening my locker, and I put my face in and I breathed, and the cold in my locker, because they're metal, I breathed just for a minute, and I was like, okay, God, for 3 days we've been doing this. And he said, how do you feel? And I remember distinctly, I thought, oh my God, what is that? And I felt this warm peace like wash over me from the top of my head to the soles of my feet, and my thoughts rushed. And I thought, okay, wait a minute, what is this? I didn't know what peace would even feel like. Friends, I didn't want to live at the beginning of those 3 days. I couldn't imagine what peace could feel like. I had tasted it for the very first time, and my thoughts were rushing because I didn't know which part was more exciting. Was I more excited with the fact that Jesus was real, or was I more excited with the fact that the Bible was true, or was I more excited about the fact that no matter what, I finally had some peace, or was I more excited about the fact that something was actually happening, or just that I had had a break? I don't know which one I was more excited with in that moment. But basically, friends, that was the start of my truthing journey. And then time unfolded and elapsed a little bit, and I'm going to fast forward a year. So at that point, I was in my first year of high school. Now we're in my second year in high school. And I was doing the same thing. Those 3 days turned into 6 days. Those 6 days turned into 12 days. And now I was developing a habit. I kept that shoebox. Time went on, and I just kept cramming and stuffing all of my problems, which almost none of them could I control. Almost none of them could I stop. Almost none of them could I wrap my brain around how I could even fix it. Well, time elapsed, and then I started walking down the hall of school like I always did, with my mind completely on him, not on myself, not on what I was going through, not on my cares, burdens, worries, troubles, traumas. And man, the trauma was stacking up, friends. I mean, it was a lot, and I'm going to go into the details of that later, because I think it's going to be massively helpful. But what was actually happening was my mind was calming down, because I was having an opportunity to rest from all of that, and I was able to think about something outside of myself, which was Him, God, who was ever present with me. My ability to keep my mind stayed fixed or focused on Him was growing. My volume and body of truth and knowledge was growing, and it was substantially starting to change my emotional nature, the way that I thought, the way that I felt. Was I perfect, and did everything get switched overnight? No, it did not. I still had a mess. I still had a lot of things that had to be worked through. But I remember distinctively walking down the hall one day, and He said to me, clear as a bell inside my heart, He said, you want to do something fun? And I said, fun? Yeah, I guess. Do something fun? Sure. Let's do something fun. And He said, would you like to get behind my eyes? Would you like to get behind my ears? Would you like me to share my heart and some of the things that are on my mind with you? Would you like to do some things together? And I was like, yeah, I guess I would like to. And so I remember picturing it just like walking down the hall with your dad, that I was constantly like pulling up on his arm, like trying to get behind his eyes or trying to get behind his ears, so that I could hear or see or think or feel what he was seeing, thinking, or feeling. And along about that time, He said, I want you to, with me, start loving just one person every day. We're going to just pick one person every day, and I'm going to tell you what to say. Don't worry about that. I just want you to, don't even think about it. Just go do whatever it is that I tell you to do, or say whatever I tell you to say, and let's just get into a rhythm of doing this every day. And I was like, well, okay. So every day I would wake up, I would leave my cares in the cares box, I would go throughout my day, and I would listen. I would keep my mind stayed, fixed, and focused on him, and I would listen to what he was having to say to me about a person or people. And friends, I've got to tell you that what transpired was an absolute miracle. What happened is my eyes, not these eyes, but these eyes in my spirit started to be opened. And I started to gain what I call a seeing ability, where I was able to see some of the things that he sees, not the masks that people wear, not the front that people put on, but I was able to look beyond that and see what was really going on in their heart. I was able to feel a little bit of what they felt. I was able to make a connection with a person on a deep soul level. And I would see somebody, pounding their locker in the hallway, and God would say, just go give him a hug and tell him the Father sees you and you're not alone. You're not going through this alone. So I would just go give him a hug and tell him whatever God said to tell him. Sometimes God would say, just go cry with them. That person's crying, just go sit and cry with them. And I would go sit and just cry with them. And this process helped me to meet some of the most beautiful, amazing, powerful, unimaginably beautiful people that you can ever imagine. I got to see not this. I got to see this, like their heart. I got to see what was really going on in their soul, because the Father would let me see just a little. Well, this went on over a period of time, but I want to say about a year. And at this point, I was still feeling very low because my heart was still broken. My heart was still in pieces. My little Brenda heart was not stitched back together yet. I still had much truth to learn. I still had much things to be replaced with truth. The Father would basically bring something up for me. I would wake up at 4:35 and spend time with him frantically, working in my journal, working with my Bible, trying to get a grip on what all had happened to me and reset everything in my mind. But friends, it's not an easy process. It's like trying to stand up while you're in the dryer. My life was very complicated. So time had unfolded. I was walking down the hall. I remember distinctly saying to the Father, I said, I'll be honest with you, I've been doing everything that I know to do. I've cast my cares on you. I've been replacing my thoughts with truth for now a couple years, and time has elapsed, and I've fallen deeply in love with your people. I see why you like people. I see why you love people. I see why you died for people. I see why they're precious to you. I see all of these things, but I'll be honest with you, there's still so much more to go. And he said, well, I'm going to show you something. And I said, what do you want to show me? He said, I'll tell you, you'll know. Well, I left school just like normal. Nothing happened. The next day was very moving. And the next day was really a pivot point for the rest of my life. I'm so glad I asked the Father. I felt very small, very insignificant, very lonely. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anybody to confide in but the Father. And I think that because I didn't, it was more real and I could hear him better. So I went to school just like usual. I went to a doctor appointment. I left school at lunch. I returned about 2 hours later after lunch, went into a math class, sat down in my math class like nothing happened. They came over the loudspeaker, you know how they do, and the principal asked to see me. And I remember being terrified because I was a straight A student and I never got in trouble. I couldn't imagine what that was about. So I went down to the office, and I remember walking in the office, and there were 6, 7, 8 men maybe standing talking in the office. Well, they called me into their office, and to make a very surreal moment of my life very brief, they said, Brenda, were you here during the lunch hour? And I said, no, sir, I was at a doctor appointment. I did you not get my slip? Is that what this is about? And he said, no, Brenda, we were wondering if you had seen the survey that we handed out during the lunch hour. And I said, what survey? And he pushed a piece of paper across the table to me. And I remember seeing the paper come across the table, and I looked down at the paper. And it was very, very simple. It was a survey, and it said, if you were broken or hurting or upset, is there anybody in this school that you would trust or that you would go to tell about your problems? And if it is, who would that be? And what kind of problems would you tell the person? And what do you need help with? Well, I remember looking at the survey and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. No, I didn't fill out the survey." And they said, "Brenda, no, you're not understanding." And they all looked at each other and they just kind of leaned back in their seat. And then they pushed across the table a huge stack of paper. And people have asked me a question: how many pieces of paper was it actually? And I don't know how many exact pieces of paper it was, but I can show you with my fingers. It was about a ream of paper about that thick. The stack was about that big. And what was on that paper was over 3/4 of my student body in both the middle school and in the high school had put my name on that survey. I sat there in a bit of a state of shock. I looked at them and I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, we thought when we handed out the survey that we made it clear, or we said that it was supposed to be a staff that they would have nominated as the person that they would go to with their problem or their trouble or their cares or whatever. But it seems that over half of your student body has put you on there. And so we kind of just want to know, what are you telling them?" And I remember looking at those men and I was really intimidated and really overwhelmed. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, "We're going to give you about an hour to review these papers. And then we're going to tell you what we think we should do with this." And they said, "Because of privacy concerns, we can't let you leave with the paper, but we can let you read it." And so I remember being very puzzled and very confused. And I sat and I flipped the papers one after another, after another, after another. And as I was flipping the papers, I heard the Father's voice in my heart again. He said, "You asked me the other day if all of the things that we were doing together, if it made a difference. You asked me if any of this had any kind of meaning, or if there was any purpose, or if you were forgotten or forsaken, or if all of these little encounters that you and I have had, if they meant anything." They mean something, Brenda. Please read these. These are the people that I love, and now that you love, and it's been a privilege to be able to share this with you. I swallowed hard. I read the papers. It is one of the most moving things I've ever seen in my life. I've calculated it. I think that there was probably maybe between 1,000 to 2,000 pieces of paper there. It was a lot of people that wrote things like, "I was at the end of my rope. I was punching my locker. Brenda wrapped her arms around me and hugged me and told me that the Father saw me and I wasn't forgotten, that I mattered to God immeasurably." Other people said things like, "I was walking toward Wicca. I thought it was the solution. After talking with you for a little while, I realized that I was missing out on an opportunity with Jesus to be his friend, to get to know him. So I've made a course correction and I now have started my relationship with Jesus. Thank you so much." Other people said some more moving things. "I was at the end of my rope. I couldn't imagine going on. I spoke up. I told a few people. My parents didn't believe me. Thank you so much for encouraging me to speak up. I found a counselor and the counselor did believe me." Some of them were even more personal. And to my great shock, some of them were even teachers at the school had put my name down. And it was just a colossal shock. Well, as I sat writing these pieces of paper, the superintendent stuck his head back around the door and he said, "Miss Davis," he said, "I want you to know, I don't have a clue what you're telling everybody, but the principal is going to book you. We're going to send you around to all the middle schools and all the high schools in our district, and we're going to give you an opportunity to speak to schools, to speak to assemblies, and all I want you to do is just tell them whatever it is that you've been telling them." And he pointed at the stack of paper. He said, "If you could just do that, whatever the heck it is that you're telling them, just go tell a lot of them all at one time. So we're going to book you. Let's just do that." And so I sat there just like in shock. I was like, did he just say that I was going to go around and speak to all the schools in my district? I was like, holy cow, what in the world? So to make a very long story, very, very long story short, that opened more doors than I could ever explain to you. I did start going around to the different places in the Dallas County and surrounding counties. Time unfolded, time elapsed, and went forward a very long way. I was still broken. I was still struggling. I had a hero that became my mentor, father, and friend. Time kept going. I felt like I needed more training. I was doing everything by myself. Started doing high school assemblies by myself. That's very difficult. If you've never had any professional training, I felt like I needed some more. So I went and watched who became my spiritual father. I went and watched him at every school gathering. He spoke at my school many times. Every time he would come to a church, every time he would come to a gathering, a local assembly, whatever, I would go and watch him. I would hang way, way, way back. After a very long time of watching him, I always hung back because he would do an altar call and there'd be 400 kids go forward, and I knew that they didn't have the opportunity to know Christ yet. So I wanted to give them an opportunity, and I didn't want to crowd him. He always asked me years later, why didn't you come forward and say something to me? And I just didn't feel led to. So one night, auditorium was packed. I was sitting midway, all the way at the back. Ranger Gary Horton is his name. He was speaking. Maybe you've heard him. Maybe he came to your school, your military base, West Point, VMI, Afghanistan, wherever. He's an Army Ranger, 101st Airborne. Maybe you were blessed and he came to your school. I don't know. But if you've ever had the opportunity, you'll never forget it. You'll never forget the experience. And it was like any other night. It was quiet. I took my notebook. I was taking notes, as I always did, because I was always impacted, always challenged. But I remember him looking straight through the middle of the crowd. And I remember him saying, "Kid," like right in the middle. And it was like time froze, like it just stood still. And I remember him leaning forward and he said, "Kid, you, the blonde, right there in the middle, not you." The boy sitting to my side, he said, "You." He said, "Why is the Father drawing my attention to you? You're sitting back there shining like the stars. Listen, when this whole thing is over, I need you to come forward. The Ranger wants to talk to you. Now let's continue." And he said, "Father, this is distracting. I'm trying to stay focused here." He went back to his sermon, did his altar call. The whole thing was over. Nervously, I made my way to the front. Well, basically, the rest is history. God spoke to him very clearly that night. I still have it. He gave me my first Ranger tab. That night, he said, "Kid, all I can tell you is that you shine like the stars, and the Father's drawing my attention to you, and I'm going to have to call your pastor and your mother and figure out why the Father's drawing my attention to you like this." So, basically, time unfolded. I packed my stuff. I went and followed him all over the country. At first, he would give me a mic for 6 minutes. He'd say, "Kid, I'm giving you a mic 6 minutes. This is my mic. You get 6 minutes. And at the end of 6 minutes, I'm going to yank the mic right out of your hand. So 6 minutes." Well, with that kind of pressure, I learned real fast to do exactly what I was told. So the 6 minutes turned into 12 minutes. The 12 minutes turned into 30 minutes. The 30 minutes turned into an hour. And I guess the rest is history. But what God did during my amazing time with Mr. Gary, I call him Mr. Gary, is he did several things. One is he gave me a father that helped put my pieces back together. Two is he gave me valuable skills that I needed to continue and perfect my ability to connect with people on a larger scale. Because you have to realize I'm an introvert. So for me, I'm the opposite of Mr. Gary. He was a crowd surfer. He loved it. He was an extrovert extraordinaire. I mean, he could, for him, an altar call with 400 people was his thing. For me, it was like, I'm tired and I want to go back and spend more time with God now. Wander in a pasture with my alpacas or something. But not Gary. Like, he was a crowd surfer. He loved it. I'm an introvert, so for me it was very, very hard to adjust to those new skills. But I did make that transition because God, each gift makes room for itself in its own way with its own flavor. I am not Mr. Gary. I'm Brenda. But with that said, those three things that God did gave me training, put my little Brenda girl heart back together. He also completed the process. And the most important thing that Gary did for me was help complete the process of divine viewpoint. So one of my favorite words in the whole wide world is divine viewpoint. We're going to talk about what is that? Why do you need it? Why does it form the foundation of truth? Well, time elapsed and went on further from that, and I guess unfolded to the rest of my story. Yes, I continued on. Yes, I got 3 degrees in mental health. That's awesome, but that's not what has formed the fabric of who I am. What's formed that is the millions of hours that me and my Heavenly Father have had replacing one lie belief with the truth, one piece at a time, constructing until I had a full foundation with enough truth that I could stand up on it and be able to fight. So I want you all to know that I did put in an application with Jesus to be a princess. And instead, Jesus stamped it and he said denied. Instead, we're going to go full warrior. And I don't know why, friends. I had to hit every single rock down the trauma ladder and experience every single kind of trauma that I can think of. All the things. But that's the path that the Father saw fit for me to walk. Why did he do that? Well, he's told me. He's unfolded that in a course and a series of dreams. In the process, I have experienced a near-death experience where I was able to see Jesus. I did gain some seer abilities at that time, and some real things changed in my life because I gained the ability to dream, to hear instructions from the Father, to get correction from the Father, which is valuable, and I'm going to be able to share some of that with you. So I'm so excited because Truthing.Life, I have just basically launched in order to give you the tools that I needed, the tools that you need to be able to stand up no matter what kind of mayhem life has thrown at you. I come to bring you my best. So I want you to see Truthing.Life as your home. I'm going to build it out over a number of weeks, months, years. I'm going to have one-on-one meetings. I'm going to have group meetings. I'm going to go back to speaking. God has seen fit in his immeasurable grace and mercy to unencumber me so that I can do this full time. So Truthing.Life has just come to life, and I'm so excited to share with you. A lot has transpired since then. So in the next video, I'm going to catch you up on some of the things that I've done, some of the places I've been, and then I'm going to start building you some tools, and it's going to be fun. But I want to answer one of the biggest questions that people are going to have for me. No, there is nothing that you can buy from Truthing.Life. Donations, absolutely. But there is nothing to buy. Everything that I offer to you is completely free of charge because the people that need what I have to offer cannot pay for that. Perfect. That's exactly the way Jesus wants it. That's the very definition of grace. So everything here at Truthing.Life is for free, and it is for you. So, precious ones, join me on this journey. Let's get started. I'm so excited. So let's go on to the next video. Love you.